Hey guys, Bryson from Trick Tools here, and this is the Dake 315 cold saw. So the cold saw is a chop saw style action where obviously you pull the head down on it and the blade will be doing the cutting. But with a cold saw, this machine turns at a lot lower RPM than say a traditional chop saw. And also being a cold saw, it uses coolant in order to cool off the blade, to cool off the cutting, and it will allow you to immediately pick up your parts right afterwards without having to worry about any heat build up in your parts. So a few details about this machine. It's all built on a cast iron base, so it's pretty heavy duty here. It is a kind of a bent sheet metal type stand that it's on, but the base about 5-6 inches here is all cast iron, and the vise is all cast iron pieces. The head of the saw here is all a cast iron frame construction. So really heavy duty and intended for lots and lots of use. So built very well. The capacity on this saw for round tube is 3 5/8. Round tubing at a 90-degree angle. We'll list the other capacities of the different materials on the screen so you can see those. The vise has a pretty cool feature. So when you tighten up the vise on your material, you get it set, you can get it snug on there, and without having to try to really tighten up on this, there is this quick clamp feature. So as you push down on this, it kind of works as a cam action here, and it puts that extra pressure you need on your part. So then when you go to release it, you can just loosen that up and the part will come right out. So that's a pretty nice feature. It also has what they call this burr-free arm here on the clamp. So what you do is when you get your part set up here, and you can move this arm in and out to be able to back it off a little more, but to be able to get it set where you need it according to where your blade is, that sort of thing, your material. Say if you're trying to cut off a smaller piece, you can still have this arm clamping on the cut side. So once you get it set, you can get that arm tightened down. What it does is, as the saw head is cutting and as you're going through the material, this outside arm holds on to the side you're cutting off and gives that stability on this side. So as the saw blade goes through, when it does go all the way through, now obviously if you had a lot of hang off, you want to be able to support that on the other end. But especially on a smaller chunk like this, when you go through, because it's not going to allow this side to move at all, it's going to keep from kicking the part out once the saw cuts all the way through. And it's going to, usually when a saw goes through and it wants to kick off the little section you cut off, that's where it starts to deflect at the end, and then you end up with the burr on one or both sides of your cut. Where with this arm, it will allow you to go all the way through, holding both sides firmly in place and keep from anything deflecting or moving, which then in turn will allow it to be pretty much burr free once you're done with your cut. So that's a cool little feature on this. The saw head can miter 45 degrees in both angles. So you can loosen up that arm there. You can swing the saw head 45 degrees this way or 45 degrees the other way. There is a little angle readout here that you can then set your angle to the mark here on the front. And once you get that set, secure that in place and you're ready to do your cut. So now the coolant flow on this uses a little mechanical pump here on the back. And when as soon as you pull the trigger, it immediately is going to start flowing the coolant. So there's a tank under here. The saw will come with a gallon of coolant, and when you get that filled up, once it's full there's a valve on the back side that you can adjust the flow in order to make sure that you have the adequate amount of cooling to be able to cut whatever material you're cutting. So you get that in here. There's two screens here on both sides, so as the coolant flows, it will drain back down into the tank, and the screens will help filter out any chips and things that may be in the coolant at that point. The guard here on the front automatically opens up as you start cutting. And so With the cold saw, this machine here is a 110 volt machine, and it's only going to turn at one speed, so 44 RPM. And if you get the 220 three-phase machine, it will be two-speed and go from 22 RPM to 44 RPM. So sounds pretty slow, and it is compared to traditional cutting, but that's what allows the cold saw to do what it does. So this machine, when it cuts, is very, very precise. I mean, you can cut off a really small sliver, and I'll show you an example of that here in a minute. All the way to whatever you need to cut lengthwise, and the vise really is going to hold everything securely. You can adjust the clamping side of the vise, in or out, depending on, if you're mitering this way, you can adjust this back in order to clear the blade, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of adjustment in the vise there to be able to secure that in place. There's a guard here in the back. It's just basically a little rubber flap that's going to deflect the coolant back down to the base of the machine and let it all run back in. The power is pretty simple. You have the main on-off here. So when you turn that on, it's not just automatically on. You got to hit the little button there to be able to then turn the saw on. And then there's the emergency stop there in order to be able to stop the machine quickly if need be. So yeah, at that point, that's about all the details on this saw. There is a little support on this side here that you can adjust to be able to hold up a part over here a little bit, and also use it as a stop. So if you slide this up, you can slide your material in and use it as a stop that way if you need to as well. So yeah, so there's a couple of different blade options for this machine, and that's going to all depend on what material you're cutting a lot of. Now, the blades will probably cut through most material if you are switching to a lot of different wall thicknesses or material thicknesses, that sort of thing. But really, you want to pick the blade that's going to be the best for the material you're cutting the most. So make sure you look at those options, and if you have any questions, you can get with us and we'll help you figure that out. So there is a kind of a blade starter pack that's going to come with 3 different blades. That way, if you're cutting a lot of one and you need to cut a lot of the other, you can swap the blade out at that point. So when you're cutting with this saw, pretty straightforward. So I've got this part clamped in here, and like I said, it's a slow cut as far as the RPM of the machine, but it'll actually cut through at a fairly quick speed. So the coolant will start flowing, and you can go right down through the material without any hesitation. So we're going to turn the machine on, and got the emergency stop on. There we go. So you can see the coolant's flowing, and you want to make sure that you have nice, good, clean coolant in there. If the coolant starts to get really used up, at that point, drain the coolant, put some fresh stuff in there to keep it proper. So yeah, you can see it's not turning at a super fast RPM or anything, but really what makes this saw unique is the stability and the ability to cut right through some heavy duty material while keeping it all cool. So we'll go ahead and cut through. And just like that, we're through that piece. So we'll back this off, and you can see how it held both sides just like I talked about, and there is pretty much nothing for a burr there. Nothing big that's going to be dangerous if you're grabbing the part. You can grab right onto it, and there's nothing sharp on the back edge to be able to cut you, that sort of thing. Real easy to go over to a little belt sander and just do a little bevel on your edge there, and you're ready to go. So works really well for doing lots and lots of cutting. So that's really the advantage of a cold saw over a chop saw. Is something, if you're going to be cutting a lot of production parts, if you plan on doing a couple hundred cuts a day or more, or whatever, that is what this kind of saw is intended for. So I'll show you guys real quick kind of how to do a sliver cut on this. So I'm going to slide that in just a little bit. I've got the blade set up here. We're going to tighten this up. So I pull that down so I can see how much material I've got sticking past the blade width. So got that on there, snug up the other side, and as I see right there, we've got just a little sliver there. So I'll show you how accurate this thing can cut right on the end of a piece of tubing. Now, traditionally, I would say you don't want to touch this on a normal saw, but with a cold saw, that little sliver right there can be picked right up because of the coolant. It's not turning at a crazy RPM, so it's not building up a lot of heat in your part, and you can cut off real precise cuts from a piece of material. Now you can see here what I talked about with the burr. So because there wasn't enough material, because I was cutting off a little sliver, there wasn't enough material to use this burr arm. There's actually a pretty good sized burr hanging off here that you want to watch for, but you can see there the difference between, you know, what it looks like without the burr arm and with it. So it's going to be a way cleaner cut when you can utilize this arm here. So yeah, this saw is a great saw for your production shop. So if you're in need of something that's going to do repeat cuts over and over and over and over again, and the blades can be resharpened even at that. So if you run through a blade and you need to, you know, you don't have to buy a brand new blade every time. You can send those in, get them resharpened. So sometimes it'd be good to have a couple of different of the same tooth count blade if you're using a lot of that. That way you can send one in, get it sharpened, get it back, be able to swap your blades in and out. So for more information on this Dake 315 cold saw, give us a call. Visit our website, Trick-Tools.com, and we'll see if we can get any extra questions that you may have answered for you. So thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you in the next one.